Tonight, a Channel 7 News special, Armed and Angry. They love their country, but fear their government.
Fire in the hole.
Who are these people who call themselves proud patriots? These self-proclaimed freedom fighters preparing to battle federal agents. Are they really protecting your rights, or are they going too far? Here's Channel 7's Guy Gordon and Shelley Smith.
Good evening. They do claim that they are fighting for your rights, but are your rights really in jeopardy?
In the next half hour, you'll meet men and women who are American citizens just like you and me, but they are armed, angry, and part of a growing militia movement in the United States. Tonight marks the one-month anniversary of the bombing that put the militia in the spotlight. Today in Oklahoma City, it was an emotional day as family and friends of the victims remembered their loved ones. 167 people who died in America's worst terrorist act. And while they mourn, investigators are looking at two prime suspects with loose ties to the militia movement.
In a Channel 7 exclusive poll, you'll learn why most people fear the militia and don't believe their rights are at risk. In fact, they are willing to sacrifice some of their liberties to prevent another tragedy. Which one of these pictures makes you feel safer? Which one makes you worry? Federal agents busting down doors is a recurring nightmare which has led hundreds of Americans to join militia groups. They fear Uncle Sam's army will come calling to snatch away their personal freedoms and their right to bear arms. But these same militias are viewed by others as havens for extremists, unregulated armies with frightening firepower. In our exclusive Channel 7 poll, we found both of these pictures make you uneasy. But you fear this more than you fear this. We asked 600 Michigan residents, do you agree or disagree with people who believe the federal government has become so powerful it poses a threat to the rights and freedoms of ordinary citizens? 40% said they agree. 50% do not. 10% aren't sure.
But I don't think the federal government has too much power, no.
Oh, they get involved in things that I don't really think they should be involved in.
Say the government should be for the people, but yet it seems that it's more of a dictatorship, if you ask me.
But a significant majority do not believe citizens have the right to arm themselves and organize to oppose the power of the federal government. Less than one-third believe in those rights. In fact, when asked, do you believe militia-type groups are dangerous and a potential threat to public safety? 61% said yes. Women were much more concerned than men. 17% don't know. Surprisingly, in spite of proposed legislation and mountains of media coverage, Michigan's senior congressman falls into that group.
Well, I don't think I know enough about the militia movement yet. It is my hope that the militia movement is composed of law-abiding, responsible citizens.
While militia members call themselves patriots and a defensive organization protecting our rights, they are viewed by others much differently. Only 15% describe them as pro-American. 62% say anti-government. And how should the government respond? Well, President Clinton is proposing a new counterterrorism initiative, more money for 1,000 federal law enforcement agents. FBI Director Free wants surveillance rules clarified, and many believe that means broader powers.
You're still Americans. That's why we're here this morning, for the liberty of all people.
Current law prohibits them from infiltrating these groups and putting them under surveillance. There have been no wiretaps for weapons or explosives investigations in 7 years. Are agents' hands tied? Well, consider this. Private citizens in the media can compile press clippings and other public information on any group, and we do. But federal agents cannot, not unless it is a statutorily approved investigation. But many remember the FBI's abuses during the Hoover years, the state police and Detroit police Red Squads. They waged political investigations rather than criminal investigations, building files on civil rights activists, war protesters, and labor organizers. Rights were ignored and violated. We asked, would you be willing to give up some civil liberties if it were necessary to curb terrorism in this country? Half said yes. Less than one-third said no.
Terrorism? Give up my rights. What rights? I don't want to give up any more rights than I already have given up.
But there is little enthusiasm to spend more money for surveillance of paramilitary organizations. 42% saying no to increased funding as proposed by the president.
Well, I'm not sure just spending more money is the answer to the problem. I think it's more likely it can be handled by a redistribution of the assets and the monies that we have available to us.
Some militia leaders and the National Rifle Association fear that terrorism prevention could mean an attack on firearms rights. It's led the NRA to engage in militia-style rhetoric against federal agents. NRA Executive Director Wayne LaPierre has issued a qualified apology for the remarks, but only after stinging criticism from the likes of former President George Bush and former NRA board member Dingell. Because the two groups share a common enemy, and many militia members are NRA members, there is speculation the two are linked. We asked, do you believe the NRA is in any way supporting the activities of paramilitary groups? Only 22% believe they are. 49% say they are not. Our poll also gave us some insight into militia members and their supporters. Just who are they? Well, here's a profile. They tend to be white males in their mid-40s with incomes below $40,000 a year. Among those polled, the less education they had, the more likely they were to identify with the militia and its viewpoint. Geographically, its strongest support is in northern Michigan and Macomb County.
Coming up, we'll take you inside the country's largest militia, and you may be surprised to learn its roots.
Also find how celebrities on the militia circuit play a critical role in keeping these private armies ready.
Our enemy is not carte blanche, everybody that's in the federal government. Our enemy is a unconstitutional, tyrannical, treasonous persons that should be the enemy of every single American.
Given that 40% of the people we polled believe the government is a threat to our rights, do people approve of militia activities? You told us, based on what you know about the Michigan militia, you do not approve, by a margin of 58% versus 15% who do approve of the militia mission. There is, however, a large undecided group. Now, just how big is the force of these paramilitary groups?
Well, Guy, they claim to have hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the United States. I have tracked the militia from Michigan to Montana, and they have two things in common: a deep distrust of government and a fervent paranoia.
Dead right in the heart. Yes.
In rural areas across the nation, men, women, and children cloaked in camouflage are arming themselves, learning survivalist training,
Up underneath the groin, pull back out.
and preparing for a showdown with federal agents.
When they come to take our guns and kick our doors, we will do them the same way we're doing this flag. We'll burn them and send them home in a body bag.
There are private armies now in 40 states. Michigan was one of the first. But the most influential militia of all sits in the shadow of the northern Rocky Mountains. It is here in God's country the foundation of the militia of Montana was laid. Just across the river, in the tiny town of Knoxon, two brothers from Minnesota started a business that has become the ideological backbone of militias nationwide.
The militia of Montana is not founded on the Second Amendment. It's founded on the first, freedom of speech and the right to peaceably assemble.
Yet gun control is an important issue for you.
Well, of course it is. It's extremely important. It's the insurance policy on all of the rest of our freedoms.
John Trockman's insurance policy includes a cache of 50 caliber guns stashed in the hills, just in case the feds attack by helicopter. Neighbors tell Target 7 Trockman once sold a piece of land to an Army supply dealer who paid with guns. Rumors about the Trockmans abound. John's brother Dave showed us the infamous bunker, which turned out to be nothing more than a root cellar.
It's just the common ordinary garden stuff.
The Trockmans claim there is no paramilitary training here, but their neighbors are not convinced.
There is a lot of gunfire and rapid fire and stuff that can be heard, especially at night. And you can see tracer fire and stuff.
Militia, Montana. The militia was born in Montana, but the seeds of paranoia were planted years ago in the Anti-Federalist Rebellion. You can find it in the John Birch Society of the 1950s, which advocated abandoning the Federal Reserve System. In the violent Posse Comitatus of the 80s, which believes the IRS is a tool of the Zionist international bankers. Christian fundamentalists and constitutionalists are also driven by a fervent fear of government.
I think we're on a slippery slope leading to civil war.
The militia's tough talk is fueled by conspiracy theories.
We are prepared also for attempts to round us up in mass arrests and transport us to FEMA concentration camps.
Militia members fear UN troops will one day be used to disarm Americans and take over the United States. They also fear black helicopters are spying on us and that our money has barcodes, so government agents can use secret scanners to count the cash of each family.
It becomes amazing to watch how these groups will, in the rhetoric of justification, will take one piece of information from one area and another piece from another area and link them together, and lo and behold, the conspiracy is in full bloom.
And if the conspiracy alone doesn't convince you, the celebrities of the Patriot Circuit might.
Using the old-style math, you can get about 4 politicians for 120 foot of rope.
People like self-styled militia guru Mark Kornke of Michigan and radical attorney Linda Thompson circulate their own videotapes about the plot to take over the world. And what do they plan to do about it?
One of the things that's unique about our Constitution, we have the jury box, we have the ballot box. When those fail, we have the cartridge box. The boiling point has been reached. The temperature is at the highest it can tolerate before we'll see a revolution in this country.
It's rhetoric like that that makes people afraid of the armed and angry soldiers. Now, if anything positive can come out of the dust of Oklahoma, it's an increased awareness of paramilitary groups.
And there is a lack of awareness, because one of the things we found, first of all, there's a large undecided component in a lot of the survey that we did. And also when we did post-interviews with people and asked them, why do you feel the way you do? They had a very difficult time explaining why.
Just like the militia has a difficult time explaining some of their views.
Their reason for their existence sometimes.
Right.
Some of their members, certainly. Stellahead, most people admit the government made mistakes at Waco.
But find out why this tragedy sparked the militia to take up arms.
The race is the issue. The militia who fights for the race, they're one and the same with us.
The Branch Davidian incident in Waco ignited the explosive growth we witnessed in the militia movement. And we asked you if you believe the government used excessive force in the Waco raid. And a significant number, 42%, said yes. Almost as many disagrees. You were also evenly split when asked if you approved of actions taken by the government at Waco. But 1/5 are still unsure. Our pollster adds that while many Americans are concerned over the excessive use of force, there would have been even greater outrage if David Koresh was a more sympathetic character. Many said that they did not agree with the allegations that were going on there and felt that it was also a mass suicide.
Guy, for many militia members, David Koresh was not the doomsday prophet portrayed by the FBI. The militia sees Waco as just another example of our government trying to shut down, intimidate, and terrorize a religious group.
17 little children, all so helpless and so small.
The fireball that exploded above the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, still burns in the minds of the militia. Waco is their battle cry in the war against a government they claim is out of control.
If anybody's guilty of fueling the flames, it's government agents. Gone right off the deep end. You know, the date April 19th belongs to a bloodletting day of federal bureaucracy.
April 19th, 1993 is the day 85 Branch Davidians died, along with cult leader David Koresh. The FBI waited 51 days before finally moving in with tanks, hoping to force them out. 25 of the victims were children.
17 little children, don't it make you wonder why? 17 little children, how could they deserve to die?
Since when do we use tanks on women and children and have an attorney general that stands up in front of the public and says, we were concerned for the children?
The latest edition of Soldier of Fortune called it a massacre, a Holocaust. On the 2-year anniversary of Waco, the North Texas Constitutional Militia laid a granite stone at Mount Carmel, carved with the names of the victims. That same day, Timothy McVeigh allegedly parked a Ryder truck in front of the federal building in Oklahoma City, shattering concrete, glass, and lives.
I started pulling babies. Babies were under this, under that. It was awful.
In a sick twist of fate, the bomb killed 19 children.
Sure, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy in Waco, too. You know, are the children who were roasted to death in Waco any less deserving of sympathy than the ones who were bombed to death in Oklahoma?
McVeigh was reportedly agitated about the government's raid on the Branch Davidians. He even made a personal pilgrimage to the burned-out ruins. Like McVeigh, the Waco tragedy is a call to arms for the Michigan militia.
Pretty well be summed up in 4 little letters, WACO. When we saw that happen, and what really happened there was the destruction of a church under the United States flag in the color of law.
But for the militia of Montana, the war with the feds began a year earlier at this primitive plywood cabin in Idaho. Ask any militia in the country, and they'll tell you what happened here in Ruby Ridge in Idaho's Panhandle is an example of a government out of control. This was once the home of white separatist Randy Weaver. His wife and child were killed in a standoff with the feds. For 16 months, militia leader John Trockman brought food to his friend Randy Weaver.
I'm appalled. I'm appalled at what they've done.
Court records show Kevin Harris shot and killed U.S. Marshal William Deegan.
He said, "Sammy, get in the house." And he said the last word Sammy said was, "Dad, I'm coming."
Weaver's 14-year-old son, Sammy, was shot in the back, and an FBI sniper shot Weaver's wife in the head as she stood in the doorway holding her 10-month-old baby. The FBI ruled Vicki Weaver's death a tragic accident, and no one was disciplined. This month, the FBI commander at the 92 standoff called the FBI's review incomplete, inaccurate, and undercut by flaws that reveal a purpose to create scapegoats. This week, Attorney General Janet Reno fired back.
Independent arson experts brought in by the Texas Rangers, not federal officials, looked at all the evidence and concluded that the fires had been set in the building. David Koresh is the person responsible for those people dying. He set that place afire.
Only the people inside the walls of the Koresh compound know what really happened that fateful day. But you can be certain of one thing. The militia will never see the government's point of view.
Well, the 42% that were concerned about excessive force, though, you wonder if they wouldn't feel better had there been a truly independent inquest into what happened at Waco and in the Weaver incident.
I think everyone would have felt better, but the militia, I don't think you'd convince them.
No, and it may yet come, too. Still ahead, they hate blacks. They hate Jews. What connection do white supremacists have to the militia?
The tie is more than skin deep.
For the most part, the militia is all white, all male. Is there a tie between the militia and white supremacy groups?
Guy, the militia will emphatically deny any connection to racist groups. However, much of the philosophy is the same. They are anti-government, anti-tax, and cling to conspiracy theories.
How do you view Hitler?
He was a great man. Probably the greatest man in the last 2,000 years who ever fought for the life of the white race.
Reverend Richard Butler's rhetoric is often offensive, but if you want to learn about right-wing extremism in America, you have to talk with the founder of Aryan Nations. And the extermination of Jews?
That didn't happen.
Didn't happen. How do you view blacks?
Blacks are the culture destroyers.
Aryan Nations grew out of the Christian identity movement in California, which believes the white race is superior and Jews are the seeds of Satan.
If you could control the future, what would the future of America look like?
Well, the future of America would be we would repatriate all the non-white, all the alien races out of here, back to the lands of their origin, and we would again have a white national state.
So you don't see people of different races and different religions living together?
Never. All history proves that.
The militia strongly deny any connection to this hate group. They say they welcome everyone.
What is the militia's relationship with the Aryan Nations?
None whatsoever. I find it extremely offensive when anybody hangs a racial banner around my neck. That's garbage.
What the militia can't deny is that one of its leaders, John Trockman, worshipped at the Identity Church and participated in Bible study. Trockman is also an associate of Louis Beam, a Texas Klan leader who is expected to take over the reins at Aryan Nations when Butler retires. Trockman's neighbors say his racist views haven't changed. He just doesn't voice them publicly.
You can't have an intense hatred for people of other races and just switch that off overnight.
I do not believe, as some have told me, that they have dropped all political and religious beliefs they used to have. They believed in, I'm going to use the term loosely, identity. The blacks and the Orientals and whoever else is here has no right in this country at all. They go that far. Okay, they did.
White separatist Randy Weaver also attended Butler's church. Weaver is the militia hero who lost his wife and child in a standoff with federal agents. But racial hatred lives beyond the borders of the Northwest.
There certainly are militias in Michigan that are identified with the Christian identity movement. There's one operation out of Adrian. Mark Kernicke, for example, his videos are peddled through this Christian Underground hotline.
Klan Watch says Ray Southwell of the Michigan Militia met with Aryan Nations organizers in Tennessee. Southwell also maintains contact with the Trockman brothers.
Another thread, really, in the militia movement would be the Posse Comitatus. Now, Posse Comitatus is Latin. It means power to the county. And that's a hate group. That's anti-black, it's anti-Jewish.
It's also anti-tax. Lobenthal says the Michigan city of Grand Blanc has a Posse Comitatus group, and some members are in the militia.
Who are we? Who are we?
Violence is a common thread between the Posse and the Order, a domestic terrorist group with connections to the Aryan Nations. Its members are strongly influenced by Norse mythology. During the 1980s, the Order bombed the federal courthouse in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, assassinated a Jewish radio personality in Denver, stole $4 million in armed robberies in Seattle, and tried to assassinate presidential candidate Jesse Jackson.
How do you feel about the violence that the Order has perpetrated on different people?
Well, it's the frustration of young men. They want to create a revolution of sorts. So their feelings was right, but their methods was wrong.
I don't hear you saying it was wrong.
I say that they were premature. They should have waited a few years until the war was ready to begin.
Whether we agree, fear it, or whether we don't, we need to pay attention to the militia and other extremist views.
Because understanding what causes their frustration may be the best prevention for future tragedies. Thanks for joining us this evening. Have a good evening.
Good night.
The first thing they will tell you when you arrive at the headquarters of the Michigan Militia is that whatever you've heard about a connection between them and the Oklahoma City bombing, it's not true. Still, reports persist that a suspect who has been charged once attended militia meetings, and that authorities are investigating another man who heads a splinter group of the Michigan Militia. And when you go on maneuvers with them, as we did this weekend, it certainly appears that they and the suspects have a lot in common. A mistrust and hatred of the United States government that borders on paranoia, an obsession with what that government did to the Branch Davidians in Waco, and an apocalyptic view of what they insist is a determination by the government to circumvent the Constitution and take away everybody's individual rights. And they're just one of scores of civilian militias in the United States who believe much the same thing. This is the Michigan Militia on training maneuvers just yesterday in the tiny town of Wolverine. What are they training for? For what many of them, and thousands like them all around the country, believe is an inevitable war against the United States government. This is a militia, or several different militias, preparing for the possibility of fighting our own government, a government that was elected by your fellow Americans. Now, am I right?
Also a government that has forgotten who they work for.
But you think it's possible that one day citizens will go to war against the government?
It happened to the
it's happened
German
all over
people.
the world.
It's happened
to every country but ours. It's happened.
But you think it'll happen to our country?
Why can't it happen here? It's happened everywhere else.
On the weekends, in their camouflage outfits, what they call camis, they think of themselves as patriots, freedom fighters, and Minutemen.
And the idea
is to blend in with the surroundings completely.
During the week, their callings are somewhat less romantic. And what do you do?
I'm a lab technician for a gray iron foundry.
I'm a tool die maker.
By trade, I'm a welder.
Some are unemployed. This is angry white male territory. But these angry men aren't just saying, let's dismantle the welfare state. They're way beyond that. They actually believe there's a secret plan to impose a one-world totalitarian system on the United States. What I hear is that you think or fear that UN troops are going to come over here and take actions against us.
Well, what we fear is our protection is leaving.
You believe that? Based on what, though?
If you would look around at different areas and bases that are being closed, are being used for UN training centers. Now, why would you train U.S. troops elsewhere and train UN troops on our soil?
Why?
That's what I'm asking you. If all of this is kosher, why would they do that?
Why would they send over 7,000 Soviet vehicles through Germany to Louisiana for paint jobs for the UN? It's a long way and an expensive way to carry vehicles for a paint job.
We've never
been. But what do you think
they're
it's
being shipped all over the United States.
For what? To take us over?
It's control and to promote the one world order. And we're Americans.
It's about a one
we're
world
Americans.
government.
Forget the one world government.
But you think they're going to take us over?
It's a possibility.
Experts say it's not a possibility, that all this one world government stuff is far-fetched paranoia. But that doesn't stop the militiamen. And you think that's going to happen? Someone's going to move against you. The government will do something.
We've seen it happen at Waco.
Waco. The 1993 federal assault on David Koresh and his disciples in the Branch Davidian compound is a rallying cry for everyone in the militia movement. It's one of their greatest fears, that the federal government will move against them with military force to take their guns away. It's said that the suspects in the Oklahoma City bombing were bent on avenging the Waco disaster. And though everyone we talk to in the militia condemns the bombing, everyone also shares the suspects' anger over Waco. What about this sort of fixation with David Koresh and what happened at Waco? What is that draw?
It's the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to bear arms. They weren't hurting anybody. Why did the government have to go in there and do what they did?
And that has kind of galvanized this movement, hasn't it?
Right, in a sense it has. It was never taken to a court because they were killed by the people that invaded there. The rightful way they should have gone was to taken them to court. But they never did it.
I don't know how many weapons he's had. You know, they had an X amount of people that were involved that lived in that facility. One weapon to each person. Is that so strange? I don't think it's strange at all.
They just took his rights away. That was the main thing. They just took his rights away, and they're doing it every day. We're constitutionalists. We just want our Constitution back.
The man in charge of this band of constitutionalists is Norman Olson. His self-appointed rank, commander. He's also the pastor of a Baptist church and the owner of a gun shop.
Militia headquarters and armory, may I help you?
We were with Commander Olson Friday when he first learned that law enforcement officials were linking the suspects in the Oklahoma City bombing to his militia.
We got problems. Did he get? Did you hear that? Did he say he got that out of Justice Department or? Maybe better leave for a minute.
That call prompted Olson to load up his rifles and head for the militia's command post, where he spent the rest of Friday denying that he had ever met the suspects or that they had anything to do with his group. Now, I have listened to some of your own videotapes, and there does appear to be a call to arms to avenge the incident at Waco. I mean, I think a reasonable person, I'm not even talking about some lunatic, I think a reasonable person could hear your own tapes and say, that person is calling for me to take revenge.
I've never asked anyone to avenge or to seek retaliation or retribution for the wrongs of the federal government.
I'm talking about a militarism. I'm talking about rhetoric that seems to be calling for some kind of a military response on your own tapes.
Now, the question I think you're asking, Leslie, is should I feel guilty or should I take the blame for what other people do after listening to what I say? I'm afraid that each person must accept full responsibility and accountability for what he or she does. I cannot take the blame for that. I would say, however, that there is so much anger and so much bitterness, and I'm afraid we've taken a large stride forward. We've gone from this age of innocence to an age of anger, and
But
now
aren't
we've
you whipping
gone
it up?
to rage.
That's the issue.
Unless the spirit of this country changes, then warfare, armed rebellion is inevitable.
Aren't you whipping up the rage, and even in your rhetoric suggesting that military action, military response is what's in order?
The military response is only a last-ditch response. Militia headquarters, ma'am.
The day after the bombing, Olson issued a statement which said in part that the Oklahoma City bombing, quote, must have been thought rational to at least someone who avenged an eye for an eye the horror of Waco. You almost seem to be explaining it. You're not horrified, you're explaining. You understand. You say you understand what they were doing, that they were avenging this thing. These are your own words.
Leslie, if I were to say that I don't understand them in that manner of speaking, I would be lying. I do understand the rage.
You say you understand. Then you have to explain to me and to everybody else how you understand that anybody could see what happened at Waco and say that that was worth what happened in Oklahoma City. How possibly that was worth the murdering of so many people who had nothing to do with Waco and the murdering of little children, of innocent little babies.
I said I understand it. I did not say I condone it.
I guess I'm asking in the context of what happened in Oklahoma and wondering, I guess, why you're not saying to yourself, that was so horrendous, it was so over the edge, that maybe I have to sit back and take stock.
Hand-wringing does no good. I've seen war up close. I've seen what it does and how it devastates nations. But hand-wringing does not accomplish anything.
Olson's hostility and suspicion run so deep that in his statement after the bombing, he even suggests that the federal government may have done it itself.
But I may also speculate that the federal government itself may be involved as a way of inciting public outrage and anger toward other patriotic movements in America.
Do you really think the federal government had something to do with blowing up that building?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Leslie. Again, I leave all the options open, we may not get to the bottom of this.
I think a lot of people are going to hear that and say that, no, I mean, come on. They're going to say, come on. You don't really think that.
Anything is possible with the federal government.
And he really believes that it's possible that the U.S. government would plant a 4,000-pound bomb in a federal building, in any building, to kill its own citizens.
Alpha, Bravo, Charlie.
Olson and his weekend warriors insist that they are a purely defensive force, no threat to anyone unless someone threatens them. But their training and their rhetoric make you wonder. With all the militiamen trappings and all of that, it sounds like you're trying to foment a revolution against the government. That's what it sounds like.
That's the government's choice, Leslie. The proverbial ball is in their court.
So you are, in a way, heading toward revolution. You are.
If we do not change our attitude in this country, and if the government continues to distance itself from the people, and it continues to alienate the people from it, then war is inevitable, revolution is inevitable, and we're not going to be enslaved. We're not going to be marched down into pits and be machine gunned. We're not going to be put into cages. We will, many of us,
Do you think that's where we're headed?
Well, history only shows that, history does show, in fact, that that's precisely where tyrants will take nations.
And you think
that's
we're
the
headed
transition.
toward totalitarianism?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You think that we're headed toward detention camps and concentration camps and Big Brother?
It could very well lead to that. In
If
fact,
that's paranoia, it's shared by most of Commander Olson's soldiers.
We're just getting aware of ourselves, just getting aware of what's going on. If anything, we're aware of what's going on with our country.
But why the military stuff? I mean, you've got a
Why
gun
not?
here, you've got a knife here.
I'm in America. I can do this.
Oh, I know.
My rights are still here. I can do that. Other countries can't do that.
I'm not saying it's not your right.
Right. Okay.
I'm asking why the military side of it. I mean, if you feel that the country is moving away from freedom, Why not the political process? Why the military aspect?
That doesn't seem to be working.
Though no one knows their exact numbers, militias like the ones in Michigan are sprouting up all across the country, with new members joining every week. Experts say there are now well-organized, armed citizen brigades in at least 26 states, mostly in the West and Midwest. The government has not taken them very seriously, but it does now.